Chapter 20. The Grungy 90's. Listen, when I think of the 70s, I think of sunshine and orange, yellow, and brown decor. Yeah, there was a certain griminess to the 70s, with a brown glass ashtray kind of vibe, but there was a hominess to it. Cozy. The 80s was high contrast pink and teal and magenta, with big crunchy hair, shoulder pad, power suit confidence. The 80s exuded energetic, over-the-top enthusiasm. And the 90s? The 90s was grungy. Yes, it was grungy thanks to grunge. What came first? The grunge scene or grungy people making disenchantment cool? If the 80s was like the high school cheerleader squad, relentlessly shouting enthusiasm, the 90s was like the jaded smart kids in the smoking section who knew what's up. I don't know. I don't have a ton of love for the 90s. This could be due to personal circumstance and that I was none too happy for most of that decade, but all I know is that when I see kids of today, including one of my own kids, loving that 90s fashion and seeing that it's been making a bit of a comeback, I just kind of shudder. Those insane jeans with each leg about 2 feet wide, paired with an ugly crop top and a choker necklace? In university, I had a pair of red jeans. I am so revolted by red jeans now. Yes, it's total red jean snobbery. I wasn't generally into the overly trendy stuff, but I caved and bought those red jeans. And I did not know what the hell to wear with them. I had a pair of ugly black lace-up shoes that kind of went with them, and this one black top, and that was my red jeans outfit. Blech. After high school, I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. But it was kind of just a given that I would be moving steadily forward and going to university. When I was in high school, sadly, there was a ton of snobbery around college. It's ridiculous. Go to college? Ew! Only the dumb kids and the weird kids go to college. The smart kids go to university, and they get a university degree, because clearly, that's a smart kid institution. I still shake my head whenever I think that this was the viewpoint that was pushed on to teens back then. All those less smart kids who went to college and got excellent jobs as much needed, invaluable tradespeople, you can do the math on that one. So yeah, I graduated high school and was incredibly, unbelievably glad that I was done with it. I hated high school by and large, and it felt like a relief to put it behind me. Early on in high school, they tried an experimental education program called specialization. This meant they were going to take the few high schools in town, and instead of offering all the usual curricula at each school, they were going to specialize them, depending on what direction a kid wanted to take toward their future. For instance, one of the schools was going to specialize in the arts, so if you loved art, music, and drama, and wanted a career in the arts, you had to switch to that school. Another school specialized in computers and technology, and my high school had a main focus on academics, maths, and sciences. I didn't know what I wanted to do for a career. I didn't know for years, but I had found it interesting when sister had to go for speech therapy when she was quite little, to help her speaking and pronunciation due to her hearing loss, and the years of speech development she missed out on because of it. So, maybe I'll be a speech pathologist? Yeah, I guess that sounds okay. Okay! My guidance counselor told me that to do that, I would need a lot of sciences and maths. Science and math. Got it. But I kind of stunk at math. And then in grade 11, I was failing math. Nuts to that. Course correction. I loved English. I loved art class. I was really good at English. I stuck with English and carried on with that into uni. I was also really good at French, even though I hated it, which is a shame because I figure I should have pushed through that typical teenager ennui where French was concerned. Could have maybe done something with that. I applied to a few different universities as we were supposed to. I got accepted to all 3. That was kind of exciting. I daydreamed of my imaginary dorm room. Scary, but maybe an adventure. Well, that wasn't going to happen. My parents told me flat out I didn't have enough money to go away to school, so I'd have to go to the local university. Also, they were willing to pay for my books and materials, but I would have to pay for my tuition. Oh boy, shit's getting real. It so happened that the summer before uni, a friend told me and a couple of other friends that one of the hotels in the tourist area was hiring maids and they were paying $7 an hour, so hurry up and apply. $7 an hour was good money at the end of the 80s. I applied and was hired. Mom was probably relieved I got a job because she had been highly disapproving that I told the water park I wouldn't be returning. I don't know what she was bothered about. That job was minimum wage and had sporadic hours. If it was raining, the water park shut down and my shift would get canceled, which I loved, to be honest. The first summer I worked at the water park, I was hired as the raft rental cashier. My job would be to sit in the fenced-off area with the floaties for the wave pool, which they called rafts, and rent them out to people during the day. I had a little wooden desk, a telephone, an old-fashioned cash register that had to be hauled out by my boss before the park opened, and I sat on a padded stool under a patio umbrella so I wouldn't get burnt to a crisp. A chunk of my first paycheck went to my uniform, a garish bright yellow polo shirt, thick blue sweatshorts, and a blue baseball cap, all with the water park logo. I never wore baseball caps, and when you're a teen and you have to wear something that is not your style, it seems particularly heinous. If it rained, my padded stool would suck up water like a sponge and be wet for at least a full day, making my super thick, hot shorts wet for basically that entire shift. I would come in, check the rafts by feel to see which needed some air or not, and I'd have to use my electric pump to top them up. Screwing the little metal caps off the air nozzles on the rafts soon made my fingers feel raw, and I had to screw and unscrew the little lid to pump up rafts all day. I also had to pump up any floaties that the customers might bring, since it was bad customer service to turn them down. I had to check over the rafts to see which were still in decent shape, and put the shitty ones at the back of the standing piles to be rented last, but still rented, of course, because in a tourist town, they don't really always care if you're getting subpar goods. It was a shock and an eye-opener how rude and unbearable people could be. They had this raft renting system that nobody seemed to understand. I can't remember how their small professional sign was worded, but it cryptically stated that rafts were $3 to rent, but you had to give an extra $2 up front that would be given back to you if you return the raft in good condition. But it wasn't worded clearly. Nobody understood the stupid sign. I had to explain the sign over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Before long, I couldn't take it, so I figured I could do a better job. I got a piece of paper and a fat black marker and wrote, "Rafts are $3. When you rent a raft, you give me $5. When you return the raft, I give you back $2. So people would come up, open their mouths to ask how much to rent a raft, see my handmade sign. I would watch as their lips moved as they mumbled through my sign, and didn't flip out on me that it cost $5 great big bucks to rent a raft. Success! It was a brief period of blissful relief, but my boss didn't like my sign, said it didn't look professional, and she made me take it down. There would be lots of complaining about the rafts. They were never pumped up to people's liking since I wasn't allowed to pump them up rock hard. I had to keep them on the squishier side, because as they sat in the sun they would expand and then they'd feel properly inflated. If I pumped them up too hard, it was easy for them to burst their seams, which was evident in the shittier rafts at the back of the piles. In the shitty rafts, the seams that were supposed to divide the long floats into that classic 4-roll, 4-bump corrugated shape, or whatever you want to call it, would instead have 2 small bumps and 1 blown-out bump, if you get what I mean. So every day, some guy would be over there squashing the mushy rafts with his disapproving expert hand and telling me they're not pumped up enough, and then I'd have to explain that I wasn't allowed to, and they expanded in the sun, and blah blah blah. One time a cheerful dude squeezed the raft and said, "Nah, that's flat!" And after I gave my spiel, he cheerfully ignored me and pumped it up himself. "There, that's better!" I can't say I really cared. Have at it, my friend. Then there were the people who loved to throw the raft into the wave pool in the deeper end and jump onto the raft, which always popped it. Then they'd bring back the flat piece of canvas with the giant rip in it and ask if they could get their $2 back. Sometimes they'd get pissed that I wouldn't give them back their $2, and sometimes they'd get so pissed off that I had to call my boss and let her come over and battle with them. It was super boring. There were a few noteworthy events. Like the time that guy hooped and hollered with excitement to ride down those water slides, and when I saw him next, he was totally gray and being wheeled away on a stretcher with a broken collarbone. There was also a time two unbelievably gorgeous French-Canadian strippers caused an uproar in the park with their not family-friendly, extremely teeny string bikinis and high-heeled shoes. And one of them asked me, "Excuse me, please to tell me where I can call for taxi?" My boss and our security man, who was a retired cop, were not impressed to have these exotic, erotic creatures at the water park, and I believe those ladies were asked to leave. There was also the time a kid was absolutely going batshit because some kind of bug flew into his ear. He was hysterically losing it, as you would, and his quick-thinking mom saved the day by sucking the bug out of his ear. Sucking the bug out of his ear. I had the first ice cream sandwich of my life at that job. My boss's very nice, elderly, retired dad, who puttered around doing maintenance work, shared one with me one day when it wouldn't stop raining, before they gave up and let me go home. The owner of the park's restaurant, an older man with bygone flair, a gruff voice, smoky glasses and brill-creamed hair, would always give me butterscotch candies you could only get in the States. He told me once, "You're a good kid. You do your work and you don't bother nobody." Then there was that time that after too many people had slipped and wiped out in the wave pool, they decided to try to fix things before the new season by repainting the bottom of the pool and adding sand to the paint to give it grip-friendly texture. So then people were coming up to me regularly with bleeding knees or feet asking where they could get Band-Aids. And finally, my favorite memory of that dumb little job, well, it wasn't my favorite thing at the time, let me tell you. One day, while I was a caged raft cashier and captive audience to the park goers, I was stuck with this stupid couple in my line of vision. The water slides were at the back of the park, and in the middle was a grassy area where people could sit and chill and tan and whatever. There was this couple hanging out, maybe in their 20s, and they were taking turns picking each other's zits. They were squeezing zits off each other's backs for ages. I did not want to see this, but it just kept going on, and they were right across from me. It actually filled me with rage after a while. After they squeezed zits for an agonizing and completely repulsive eternity, they super made out for a bit, and then they finally walked off hand in hand for more waterslide fun with super red zit pick marks on their backs. Eventually I got moved out of the raft cage and into the gift shop. It sucked slightly less, but then I had to deal with kids trying to get their money back for the whoopee cushions they bought, blew up rock hard, jumped on, and burst. Good times. So yeah, I decided after a couple of summers it was time to keep it moving. Onward to hotel room cleaning. My first day as a chambermaid was shocking to the soft, gentle-souled marshmallow that I was, but I needed to pay for university, or so brother told me. It was fairly overwhelming. We all had to wear these gray smock dresses, like we were all in prison. The ladies were fairly rough around the edges, and nearly all of them smoked in our gray, utilitarian basement lunchroom, complete with basement pipes snaking overhead. I nearly collapsed after hustling ass that day, panting as I tried to keep up with the gruff, experienced woman training me, and with the tight schedule needed to clean so many rooms. I hated it, and as the day wore on, I decided all I had to do was survive that day, because I wasn't going to return. I cheerfully told brother as much when he was there to pick me up after work. "Thank God that's over," I said. "I'm not doing that again." "You have to," brother said in his older sibling authoritarian, no two ways about it voice, as though I had lost all sense of reality. "You need the money." I burst into tears. Luckily, before long, I overcame that culture shock, got myself into a workable groove, and sweated my ass off cleaning rooms for 4 summers, successfully paying my way through university. There were some fun times, though, especially when it wasn't busy and we were still getting paid to be there and do little odd jobs. There was that one time I was down one of the basement floors in a wing way far off from the maid's lunchroom, because that hotel was ridiculously huge, with a couple of punky alternative chicks I enjoyed hanging out with, and we were unsupervised and goofing off. One of the girls took a much-coveted can of orange-scented room freshener and her cigarette lighter, lit the lighter, sprayed the bottle, and created an impressive yet slightly horrifying burnt orange streak of fire down several feet of the hallway. This inspired a great deal of laughter and, "Oh, shit!" I don't recommend trying this for obvious reasons. Smelt like burnt oranges for a while after that. There was also that fun time I was down on my own in a far-off section of the hotel. My job for most of that day was going from room to vacuum up potato bugs and scrub mold off the walls. At some point, my boss came to find me to ask me to come help another maid in another section. I had been alone for a few hours when suddenly I heard her call cheerfully into the room I was in. "Karen, hon!" "Ah!" I screamed in startled surprise. "Ah!" she screamed back in her much deeper Western New York American pack of smokes voice. "Jesus Christ! You gave me a fucking heart attack!" Super nice lady. I liked her very much. Even when she was yelling at all of the staff because the cleanliness of our rooms had earned the hotel some demerit points, and she told us that our brains fell out of our asses. Also, she had a staff party for all of us one time at her home in the US. For like a week leading up to it, she was so excited and kept telling us that at the party we were going to have beef on weck. I was too polite to say that I did not know what the hell weck was. You know, I think I remember more from that job than I do from actual university. I don't know if I even remember all that much from university. It's weird and kind of sad. Elementary school was so vividly captured in my mind. I still have dreams that I'm back in elementary school. In fact, I have this one recurring dream that it's the last day of school and I have to clean out my damn locker. And my locker is always a disaster. High school is fuzzier on a lot of details, but I remember it through feelings, if that makes sense. And university? 4 years, mostly a blank, and a lot of money down the toilet, really. I was pretty depressed in university as I tried to carry on with life, and I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to skip as often as I could get away with, and nothing felt better than when I'd decide to get the hell out of there, as I practically skipped across that huge parking lot to my dad's little pickup truck. Often I'd be off passing the time wandering around the mall, feeling empty and lost, but relieved to not be in class. I met Hubs in second year. He was in a couple of my English classes, and for some reason, even though he was mostly a quiet guy, he stood out to me. He had clearly had his head buzzed at some point, so he only had stubble when I first noticed him. He wore a trench coat, Docs, those iconic Dr. Martin black combat boots, and t-shirts with skulls on them. Was this guy a punk or what? He'd come into the lecture hall for Children's Lit, sit down, take his coat off, take out his binder, whatever book we needed that day, and his pen, lay it all out neatly on the little attached desktop, and then just sit and wait, nearly motionless, for class to begin. Fascinating. Never seemed to say a word until one day when we were in a seminar and he described the book we were reading with sound effects. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was so reserved. I found a reason to make some stupid small talk with him. We started hanging out more and more after that. He was really nice to talk to and we just got along really well. I drove to school and he took the bus to and from school. He had a room in a grimy house where the owner rented out rooms to students. We started dating. We went to the movies, or I'd hang out with him in his little room off the front entranceway of the house. It was just that nice groove of both of us comfortable spending lots of time together. Toward the end of that year, in the spring, I didn't feel well. I had some kind of a virus and felt completely worn out. Like I wanted to sleep all the time. One day I had a spectacular headache that I couldn't shake, and when I woke up the next day, my eyelids were swollen and puffy. I had a rotten sore throat for a bit, but since I was used to the usual seasonal viruses, I just kind of powered through. I went and got checked out at my doctor's, and they did a throat swab and a blood test and whatnot. A couple of days later, I was hanging out in Hub's room. We'd finished school, and Hubs was sitting on the floor playing video games. I was lying on his bed watching. The phone rang. It was my doctor's lovely medical receptionist. I'm guessing Mom had given them Hub's number? Or was I carrying around that ridiculous 90's cell phone that came in its own little suitcase? At any rate, I answered the phone and the receptionist said, "Karen, hon, hi, it's Trish. The doctor wanted me to let you know. Yeah, you've got mono." Mono? Where the hell did I get mono? It was slightly confusing because I only knew mononucleosis as the kissing disease back then. And the only other girl I knew of who had been sick was this annoying, braggy nerd in one of my English classes who loudly let everyone know that she read all the rest of the required materials over spring break because her tropical resort was boring. And I definitely hadn't kissed her. This was right at the end of the school year that I'd found out, and sadly, I was already starting to feel a little better. I say sadly because had I known I had a legit reason to get loads of extra sleep, I would have totally used it. Because sleep. 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 Starting in my teens, I could never get enough sleep. I would sleep in until 11 o'clock, 11:30, noon, God, maybe even 1 o'clock if I was able to. Sister was brutal for sleeping in too, and we'd be up there in our shared bedroom snoozing away half the day. Friends would phone and Mom would lie for us and say we were getting a shower or something because we were also kind of embarrassed of our guilty little sleep secret. True, I stayed up far too late in those days, but I could sleep through anything back then. I was advised that I shouldn't go back to work right away and take a couple of weeks after school ended to rest and recuperate. I called my boss at the hotel and told her, "Oh shit, hon. Okay, just get better," my boss said in that gravelly voice. Those 2 weeks were among the nicest weeks of my life. I was finished school, I didn't have to work, and the weather was beautiful. We were having the most gorgeous warm spring. Almost every day, I'd get our family Sheltie dog, and we'd hop into the car and drive up to Fireman's Park to the top level and just walk around up there. On a clear day, there's a lovely view of the land stretching out below to the lake, and if it's really clear, you can see Toronto in the distance. There didn't seem to be anyone else around, just me and Woody and the beautiful warm breeze and sunshine. We'd sit together after walking and playing, and then we'd come home. Dad told me once that as a fireman, they had learned that one way of dealing with stress and stressful situations is to imagine a place where you are at your most relaxed and content. Really envision it in as much detail as you can, and imagine that you're in your comfort place. For a very long time, I would imagine myself at the top of Fireman's Park with our dog, sitting down in the longish grass as the warm breeze blew over us. Often I'd imagine we were under a tree on a blanket, and Woody would be cutely doggy sleeping on his side, and I'd just lay back and fall asleep too. We never had that magical nap up there, but it sounded amazing. Each year during the summer, Hubs would go back home and work at his full-time job, and I'd go back to work at the hotel, sweat buckets, and clean my 14 rooms, plus all the extra rooms that were invariably tacked onto our list because there were always maids calling in sick, so we had to pick up the slack. I'd work from 8:30 until 5 o'clock at least 5 days a week, more if we were really short, and hope that eventually I'd get a damn day off. Come home from work, have dinner, pass out on my bed for a 2-hour nap, wake up in a fog, get showered, do my hair, slap on some makeup and the cutest outfit I had, and head off to our favorite dance club with a couple of girlfriends. Nearly every day in summer, work, sleep, dance. That dance club was beside the hotel I worked in, and it was awesome. I love dancing. They had a great big video screen by the dance floor. The music would be booming, and when the DJ would put on a particularly popular song, the dance floor would go from busy to packed. It was the best time. I'd get on my high-waisted mom jeans. We didn't call them that back then. They were just jeans. My crop top, lace choker necklace, crimp little sections of my hair and curl others, slap on some brick-colored lipstick and coat it with face powder so it was as matte as possible, douse myself in some perfume that probably smelled like wild berries or slightly like watermelon or Japanese cherry blossom, and off we'd go. Then summer would end and it would be back to uni. The girls I worked with who were students mostly all went away for school and got to finish work by Labor Day, but because my work knew I was local, I couldn't really get away with that so easily. I'd always agree to work until Thanksgiving weekend in October. That was my hard, fast, if not arbitrary, end date. The only good thing about still having to work back then was that after Labor Day, our city used to be quiet. That doesn't happen anymore, but it was nice. You could just drive around wherever you wanted and it would be so peaceful and quiet again. There would maybe just be the odd tourist staying at the hotel and bus tours of extremely tidy and polite old people. It was pretty good. My floor, that I was assigned to regularly, was in the outside courtyard section of the hotel, and it got closed down once it started getting chilly out, so I'd be stuck cleaning random sections of the main body of the hotel. One time there was a pleasant guy staying at the hotel, probably in his 30s, which, when I was in my 20s, seemed wicked old. He was yapping away to me about this and that, and then concluded by letting me know he was checking out and had already taken all his stuff out, so I could go ahead and start cleaning his room. Off he went, and I let myself in, which was good because most people never remembered to put their "Do Not Disturb" signs up, so you'd be knocking away like an idiot, nobody would answer, and you'd be letting yourself into the room only to be mortified to see people sleeping in bed and back the fuck out of there as quickly and as quietly as possible. So I was glad to know his room at least was empty. Nice dude. When I went in to clean the bathroom, I saw that 6 boogers had been wiped on the counter right under the mirror. Thanks, buddy. Not like it was a glamorous job, even without the snots on the counter. Gross travelers sometimes partied it up and then barfed into the ice buckets. Or there was barf on the floor. Or families who walked out looking polished and respectful, but absolutely trashed their rooms like utter pigs. Sometimes people would say to me, "There's a tip for you in there," as they were leaving, and then I'd come in to find a handful of pennies, nickels, and dimes on the table. One time I had to break a ginormous poop that would not flush down in half with a handy travel brochure. People would get pissed at you when their rooms weren't ready early for them to check in, but didn't realize that you had to clean up after that tour of young guys in town for some sports event, and they'd trash 3 floors of rooms. Sometimes clean towels were late to arrive from the laundry room, and you didn't dare ask Marty, the head of laundry, when the towels would be ready because that guy was always volcanically pissed at everyone, and especially the maids, and would lose his shit when maids would phone laundry and ask when the towels would be ready. He would also flip the fuck out when maids would use a fresh towel to wipe the bathrooms down. Don't worry, this was back then. Standards have changed, thank God. Sometimes you'd come back after your day off to find that whoever had used your cart while you were away had taken your new, awesome sponge and traded it with a completely worn-out, thin, furry sponge. Or they'd swiped that coveted bottle of toilet cleaner you had in the bottle that was shaped like a duck. Or they rearranged the shit on your cart and put the sheets in the middle and the towels on the bottom or whatever. When you were off, if you had something on your cart you really liked, like that pristine, yellow on one side, green abrasive scrubby on the other side sponge, you made sure to hide it in your floor's linen closet. The girl I shared the closet with had made a sign with large letters on it that said not to rearrange her cart. A can of orange-scented air freshener was also highly prized. So stupid, but true. There was the odd perk, though. Sometimes guests would leave full, unopened bottles of booze behind when they checked out, and nearly everyone loved that, and envied the lucky maid who had those rooms as she gleefully paraded her bottles through the lunchroom. Once in a while someone would leave an exciting tip. Sometimes guests would leave behind nearly full bottles of good shampoo, body wash, or fancy soap. Always a treat. And sometimes, and I have to warn you that this probably sounds super gross, sometimes guests would leave a nearly full tray of pizza. I don't know about the older maids, but us in our 20s frigging loved that. We were always hungry, especially as we sweated off 10,000 calories per day racing around to clean a zillion rooms. I can't even relate to why this was exciting anymore, especially in light of current worldwide germ fear, but seriously, if pizza was left behind, or a large pristine portion of some fancy cake, everyone would be down for that. If I was a chambermaid now and a pizza was left behind, there'd be no way that I'd even think of eating any. But there you have it. The 90s, after all, was still somewhat related to the easygoing 1980s. There was a guy there at the hotel, and he was like a boss above my boss. And when he'd come by to inspect how things were going, it was never good. He usually had his trusty spray bottle of straight bleach in his hand. He was older, with gray hair, and just not particularly nice. We'd see Mel working his way through the rooms in our outdoor courtyard with his spray bottle and a cigarette clamp between his lips as he spritzed undiluted bleach over the moldering grout in the bathrooms. We hated it when he was there with his bleach. It made the rooms toxically unbreathable and didn't seem to make a great deal of difference because the mold was growing under a lot of the grout and the caulking. I liked some of the girls there a lot, and I really liked joking around with the housemen, young guys who were generally hilarious and more interested in chatting and cracking jokes than carting away the dirty laundry and working as hard as they were supposed to. As soon as I graduated from uni, though, I decided I was done with that job. Mom was not pleased. She thought it was foolish that I would leave a guaranteed job with decent pay. I was filled with young graduate ego, though, and that was one of a few times in my life that I wasn't swayed by Mom's opinion. Because eventually, university came to an end, and not with a bang, but a whimper. There's a nerdy little literary reference in there if you happen to be a pseudo-literary type too. I don't know what to tell you about university. I've blocked out or forgotten a lot of it, but it was fairly pathetic on my part. Like I said, I was depressed under the surface, and I skipped a lot of it. One time I even had a mortifying meeting with one of the professors with whom, aside from that meeting, I'd never spoken with directly. It was a second-year elective I'd taken just to work toward fulfilling credit requirements. I skipped that class a lot. It was my first class of the day, and getting up in the morning in those days was nearly impossible. I was nearly always almost late, and then after barreling up the highway like a total maniac, I'd get to that insane parking lot and find it full once again, with many other students anxiously circling for a damn spot. Well, fuck it, I'd think, and then I'd be heading off to the mall, feeling a teeny bit guilty, but mostly relieved. Or I just totally slept in and didn't go. So then I showed up that one day, and at the end of the teacher's announcements at the beginning of class, she said, "And if Karen C. can stay behind after lecture, I'd like to have a word with you." My stomach dropped. It was horrifying. One of the good things about university is that in a lot of classes, you could be almost totally anonymous. I sweated through the rest of class and then had to sheepishly follow the teacher to her little office. We sat down, and she appraised me silently for a moment. "You know," she said, "I consider myself to be one of the more caring members of the faculty, and I would hope that if any student had a problem, they could come to me." Me dying. "I've noticed you've missed a lot of classes. Is there any particular reason?" "My boyfriend died." No, I've just had a hard time being on time in the mornings. I don't care about anything, and I'm barely keeping it together. And finding a parking space. I'm depressed, and on the inside, I'm not functioning very well. I need to budget my time better." I muttered out some bullshit. She tried to stare into my soul. In the end, she probably told me I had to make more of an effort, and then I beat it the hell out of there. But what could she do? She actually tried, and the sad thing is, I found it mortifying. It reminds me of times as a lunch supervisor when I would see kids clearly troubled about something, and I'd try to gently extend my hope that I could be a sympathetic ear or of some help, and they always seemed to be nearly cringing to death. What if I'd been able to tell that lady that even though I was still making it to most of my classes, on the inside I was absolutely shattered? But I carried on, because what could I do? After my boyfriend died, just after my first year of university had concluded, I had to call the hotel and tell them I couldn't come back to work just yet, and why. It had been just about 2 weeks when Mom came into my room one day and told me that she and Dad decided that it had been long enough and they felt it was time for me to get back to work. 2 weeks. After 2 years, 4 months, and 2 days of heartbreak, fear, and hell, and the crushing, debilitating sadness of my boyfriend's death, 2 weeks. Time to get back to work. I remember walking back into the hotel that first day back and into the lunchroom to leave my lunch and things before getting started. I remember the maids who were in there staring at me like maybe I was a bomb that could explode at any minute. Nobody said anything to me. Time to get back to work. I spiraled that summer. I tried to latch on for dear life to a few different guys. I cried and cried in bed at night. I drove around late through town and shrieked in the truck with the windows rolled up. I drove to the cemetery all the time, especially at night, and just idled there with my headlights bouncing off the gravestone, crying and crying. One time a white wolf dashed across the cemetery road I was winding slowly down, not too far from me where I was driving. It scared the hell out of me. I screamed. I didn't understand. I was suddenly single, but I hadn't broken up with anyone. I was single now? How was I single? I had a boyfriend, and then I didn't have a boyfriend? I kissed more boys that summer than I had my whole life. I laid in my bed at night and wished my boyfriend would come walking into the room and save me from all of them, from everything. I was drowning. I tried to keep in touch with his parents and family for a little while. It was awful because he wasn't there. It was so completely and utterly and suffocatingly painful that I couldn't do it. I cut them off completely not long after. Trying to keep up any kind of relationship with them was impossible at that time. I felt very badly about that, but I just couldn't do it.